Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. Hey, this week I want to talk about a famous quote from Yogi Berra. It's not over till it's over. Now, if you don't know the story, let me set it up. It's 1973. The New York Mets had recently hired Yogi to be their team manager. And he had brought the team into last place in the division. Why? Many of the starters got injured. And as a result of that, they were off to a very disappointing injury-plagued start to the season. In July, a reporter stopped Yogi at one of the games and he says, "Hey, Yogi, is the season over for the Mets?" Now, Yogi's response was classic, and if you know Yogi, he's known for his Yogiisms, those unique quips and quotes that he shared throughout his entire life as a player and a coach. This one was classic Yogi. When the reporter said, "Is the season over?" Yogi looked back and he smiled and he said, "It ain't over till it's over." Well, if you know the story, the Mets key players returned, and when they got back in the lineup, they started winning. They started going from last place to the middle of the pack, and then the next thing you know it, they ended up getting the opportunity to compete for the National East Conference. Yogi's don't quit attitude led his team to a come from behind win in that National East Conference to win the pennant and have the opportunity to go and represent the National East at the World Series. They ended up losing to the Oakland A's that year in the 1973 World Series in a 7-game nail biter, losing 4-3. Now, if you don't know Yogi Berra, let me tell you a little bit of his background. Yogi played in the majors for 19 seasons. 18 years of those, he was an all-star, and 10 times he was involved with a championship game where they won 10 championships as a player. The fact that he won 10 World Series championships sets him apart because he won more World Series than any other player in Major League Baseball history. Yogi was regarded as one of the best catchers to ever play the game. In 1972, he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, if you're a baseball fan, you know that Yogi's reputation followed him when he hung up his cleats and he went into coaching. He was considered a lucky charm by every franchise who had the opportunity to bring him on and make him a part of the team. He was known not only for his ability to lead people to win and his, quote, being a lucky charm, but he was known for his quips, his quotes, and that don't give up attitude that he preached almost like a pastor on Sunday with religious fervor to his players. Whenever his team lost, Yogi, as a leader, took responsibility. I love the quote that he would often say when they lost the game. He would say, we just made too many wrong mistakes. I don't know what the right mistakes were, but we made too many wrong mistakes, and that's why we didn't win. But Yogi's don't quit attitude was always present in the coaching tips and the leadership lessons that he shared with his players and with the fellow coaches that he was leading. Some of those included ideas like embrace the journey, understanding that it's too easy to get focused on the destination, but it's more important to enjoy the journey day to day. He talked about accepting change and the fact that the future is always changing and we should change with it. Don't get stuck in the past because the past is over and you can't go back and change it. Yogi was big on taking action because he understood that action can alleviate uncertainty and it can transform ambiguity into insight. Yogi was also big in talking about taking risk because he knew there was no opportunity to succeed until you took a risk. So he was one of those guys that said, don't be afraid to take a risk because that's where wins come from. Now, as I've already said, Yogi was a never give up guy, and he made it a point to make sure that if his team made a mistake, they learned the lesson so they didn't repeat it a second time. And he was very singular tasked to make sure that his players focused on one thing at a time. And he wanted them to, if it was fielding, to get better at fielding. And if it was batting, to get better at batting. To focus on becoming the very best one element at a time in your game, and then adding to that over time to become better than you were the day before. Now, if we look through history and you ever do a Google search or look up online, you're going to find a plethora of yogiisms that he shared throughout his years as a player and a coach. And over his illustrious career, he said a lot. And many of those quotes that he shared have gone on to really take on a life of their own. And this week's leadership lesson is focused on the quote that I shared earlier: it ain't over till it's over. You know, Yogi Berra was spot on with that observation. Yogi understood this, and it's something every leader needs to understand. Motivation gets you started, but persistence is what's necessary to get you to the finish line, or in Yogi's case, to get you through the pennant, win the championship, and have an opportunity to go to the World Series. Now, as I previously shared, and any martial artist knows, it's not how many times you get knocked down. It's how many times you get back up, get back in the ring, and keep fighting. That's what matters. That's where we're talking about persistence and being willing to keep going and keep fighting for the win, no matter how hard it is in the moment. You know, I believe that's what Yogi was saying to that reporter. But I'd also believe he was sending a not so subtle message to his players who he knew were going to read the article, because he wanted them to know that he believed in each and every one of them, and he believed that for the Mets, the best was yet to come. Now, the Mets made this miraculous comeback, and as an opportunity, they had a chance to go and play in the World Series. But the Mets' comeback isn't the only time in history that you and I have seen persistence pay off. Let me share another story, one of my personal favorites when it comes to persistence. I'm a child of the 1960s, and if you grew up in the 1960s and you turn on the television, Western and police shows, that was the mainstay of the fledgling television industry in the 1960s. Now, Gene Roddenberry was a freelance writer, and he scripted episodes for Highway Patrol and Have Gun Will Travel. Loved Have Gun Will Travel. But in 1964, Gene got the opportunity to start producing his own TV show, The Lieutenant. Now, things for Gene were good. He had an opportunity to have a regular gig, and no longer a freelancer, he was producing his own show. But in the back of Gene's mind, he had a vision for something new for television, something different, something innovative, and something out of the box. He believed that America was ready for a new kind of Western, but this time it was not going to be a wagon train. It was going to be a wagon train to the stars. So Gene pitched his idea and a script to NBC and to Desilu Studios, and they commissioned a pilot episode. Well, sets, props, costumes had to be built, and Gene's insistence that every element of the show had to be believable put significant challenges and ran up the operational costs of that pilot episode. Gene wanted the television audience to believe that this futuristic world that they were viewing on the television screen was based in science, and looking forward into the future, what they were seeing on the television could actually be the future of America, the United States, the world. But he had a small budget and a short window, so Gene, the crew, the staff, and all of the people that were part of the set, including the actors, worked tirelessly over a 2-month period of time to produce Gene's vision for the future. Production started in November of 1964 and concluded in January of 1965, and the studio executives gathered together in a room to watch a pilot episode entitled The Cage. Now, NBC wasn't sold on the idea, and after seeing the finished product, they called Gene's vision cerebral and weird. That's an interesting observation, but they didn't like it, and as a result of that, they were concerned that a small studio like Desilu couldn't produce a science fiction, what would essentially be a mini movie every week. So Gene Roddenberry's idea of a wagon train to the stars was shot down. But remember what Yogi said: it ain't over till it's over. Now, if you don't know the name Desilu, Desilu was a studio that was founded by Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. Now, Lucy, being the namesake of the studio, believed in her heart of hearts that this idea of Gene's could work. And even though she wasn't a fan of the TV series itself, she understood television and what consumers wanted. So Lucy herself convinced the NBC executives to do something unthinkable. She convinced them to allow Desilu Studios to shoot a second pilot. Now, in the 1960s, this was unheard of. This was unknown. You got one shot to make it in network television, and if you blew it, you blew it. But NBC reluctantly agreed. They ponied up an even smaller budget for a second pilot episode. And that episode was entitled Where No Man Had Gone Before. Now, with Lucy's support, NBC agreed to produce the series after they saw the second pilot, and they agreed to maintain the funding for at least one season. So on September 8th, 1966, the very first episode of this wagon train to the stars, entitled The Man Trap, debuted to a national television audience. And that television show opened with the following narrative: Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. We're talking about Star Trek. Now, Star Trek went on to change the face of network television for 3 seasons. And after those 3 seasons were concluded, it continued to entertain audiences even to today through syndication some 50 plus years later. Star Trek has also spanned a growing number of sequels, both animated and live action, including Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and a host of new streaming series streaming all over streaming services today. Gene Roddenberry well understood Yogi Berra's pithy quote, "It ain't over till it's over." You know, one more comeback story while I'm thinking of it, and it's one that's familiar because it's recent history. In 2016, a real estate developer and a TV reality star assumed the highest office in the land: President of the United States. Donald John Trump defeated the odds to become the 45th president, stunning the world, the political establishment, and everybody and anybody that couldn't believe that this man had made it to the highest office in the land. 4 years later, he lost in a close election to Joe Biden. And you know where the story's going from here. Once again, the pundits, the pollsters, and the prognosticators got it wrong, and in November 2024, Donald Trump was elected for a second term, the only time a president has won non-consecutive elections twice in the history of the nation. He won a landslide victory to become the 47th president of the United States. You know, I think the immortal words of Yogi Berra were personified once again: it ain't over till it's over. So what are the leadership lessons that we can glean from Yogi's quote and the lives of the individuals I've shared and countless others who've lived and succeeded by this very motto? To me, I think there's 6 takeaways, and let me briefly share those with you. First, I think Yogi's quote emphasizes the importance of persistence. And that's really where I want to lean in and focus. And I hope you're picking up from what we talked about with the examples I've shared so far. Even in challenging and uncertain times, persistence is what is necessary to get you from where you are to where you want to be. As a leader, it is crucial for you to maintain a mindset of resilience, making sure that you demonstrate before your team that you are never going to give up or you're never going to assume failure just because things are bad in the moment. You know, the obstacles around you may appear insurmountable, but success often requires pushing through adversity. Ask any football team who lines up on the gridiron on any given Sunday and they have to push their way through adversity to score a touchdown. Now, the second takeaway I think we can take from Yogi's quote is this: our outcomes in life aren't always predetermined. At the time Yogi made that statement, the Mets were at the bottom of the barrel when it came to the National East Conference. They went on to win that conference in a come-from-behind victory. But Yogi's quote serves as a reminder for a leader not to be complacent or not to see any situation as hopeless when it's not. Remember, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up and get back in the fight and keep pushing for the win. Now, I think the third takeaway we can take from Yogi's quote is the fact that Yogi demonstrates the importance of maintaining a positive attitude. Yogi wanted his players to know that he believed in them and their ability to succeed. You know, thinking back in history, I think of Napoleon Bonaparte, another individual from history who overcame great odds. He famously said, "Leaders are merchants of hope." Yogi was reminding his players that as long as there's time, there's hope. The same can be said for you in your leadership role. Now, Yogi understood his role as a leader was to inspire the team to keep believing that the win was possible. The next game was a win, and the next game was a win. And if they kept winning, they had an opportunity to get to the playoffs. Even when things looked impossible, Yogi continued to remind the team it ain't over till it's over. What are we talking about? Optimism, a positive mental attitude. And when the leader demonstrates that, it becomes contagious. When the leader shares that positive mental attitude through what he says or what he does, it infects other people on the team and they shift from I can't to I can. That can-do attitude demonstrated by the leader keeps the team confident, it keeps them engaged, and it keeps them fighting for the win. Now, the fourth takeaway I think we can take from Yogi's message is a reminder that today's loss doesn't make you a loser. Remember, you're not a loser unless you choose not to get up when you've been knocked down. And sometimes in life, matter of fact, oftentimes in life, you got to fail your way to success. And Yogi understood this. We've talked countless times about people like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Marie Curie, and other famous people from history who struggled through failure to find their way to ultimate success. Yogi understood that and wanted his team to know he believed in them. And just because they were losing, they weren't losers as a team. Yogi understood that success takes time and it doesn't happen overnight. Just because you're behind in the game or you're staring down a challenge or an obstacle you didn't anticipate, it doesn't mean it's over. It's not over till it's over. As a leader, understand this. Successful people understand success requires tenacity, patience, dedication, and persistence. Why? Because you're playing the long game. Now, the fifth takeaway from Yogi's quote to me is a call to leadership. My mentor, John Maxwell, says it well. People do what people see. And when Yogi's players heard him utter these words, it ain't over till it's over. And he backed that up by his coaching in practice, getting his team ready for the next game and the opportunity to win. What did they see? They witnessed Yogi Berra modeling an unshakable belief in his team and their ability to rise to the occasion and win the next game. He demonstrated the tenacity and the persistence he wanted his team members to embrace and live out. Remember, leaders go first. Leaders set the example they want those that they are leading to follow. Now, number 6, the last one, when I look at Yogi's quote, it reminds me that as leaders, you and I are to manage expectations and we're supposed to celebrate the wins. I've talked about this a lot, celebrating the wins. Even the small wins need to be celebrated because remember what Tony Robbins says, what gets rewarded gets repeated. And neuroscience backs that up. Every time we celebrate a win, we get a release of endorphins and those feel-good chemicals in our brain that says, hey, that feels great. Let's do it again. And Yogi understood that no matter how bad things seemed at the moment, there was always a small victory to be recognized. So as a leader, you need to understand that progress is achieved one step at a time. The game is won one home run at a time. And this requires that you have first a purposeful plan to get the team from where they are to where they want to be. You show them what it's going to take to create the win. And once you've done that, you then set and manage the expectations as part of the planning process. So now everyone knows the way. They know what's expected and they know what's going to be required of them and how they're going to be held accountable. So let me wrap up today's teaching by giving you some practical tips on these 6 key takeaways. Remember, the first was persistence. So here's the takeaway. Stay focused and continue moving forward, no matter how difficult and how challenging the circumstances may seem in the moment. It is your job as a leader to encourage those you're leading to embrace the journey, the good and the bad, and apply the lessons from each, because this is where we learn, we grow, we improve, and we mature. The second takeaway was focus. As a leader, you've got to remain engaged, but you've also got to remain flexible and adaptable. You've got to be constantly assessing what the team is facing and what adjustments they need to make to continue to move forward. But you want to keep their focus on the ultimate goal that's before him. Now, the third key takeaway was positivity. What do we do here? You want as a leader to cultivate a positive attitude so the team believes that success is always within their grasp. When you do this, it's going to sustain morale even in the difficult times. It's also going to provide an opportunity for the team to stay motivated and have the persistence necessary to keep fighting for the win. Now, number 4 is commitment. And in this fourth takeaway, here's what I want you to learn from that. As a leader, I want you to encourage your team to stay the course, even when there's 2 outs, it's the bottom of the ninth, and it's a full count. Commitment requires you take one more swing at the ball, even when the game and the season are on the line. You step in the batter's box, you grit your teeth, you stare down the pitcher, and you get your eyes on the stitches of the ball so you can hit it out of the park. It also means you're willing to step on the mound and throw one more fastball to strike out the batter who's already hit 3 home runs out of the park in tonight's game. Talking about commitment, being committed no matter what. Number 5 is leadership. And how do we use this? Let me give you a takeaway here. Leaders lead by example. Remember, you've got to be the role model that your team can emulate. When the team sees you as a leader, calm, cool, collective, confident, and focused, even in the midst of outstanding challenges and obstacles, the team instinctively knows that you as a leader believe in them and believe in their ability to achieve a win. And the last one is what? Celebrate the wins. You want to celebrate progress, not just the milestones. To go back to Yogi Berra, every strikeout, every fielder's choice, every single, every double play was a win. You want to celebrate them. Remember, what gets rewarded gets repeated, so you as a leader want to continue to reinforce what you want more of, and that's more wins. Because when you reward what gets repeated and reward the wins, guess what? You're likely to get more wins out of your team. So let me leave you with a quote as we wrap up today from James Clear. And I think this quote pretty much sums up this week's leadership lesson. Here's what Jim says. You can't make a comeback if you don't start. It ain't over till it's over. Thanks, Yogi. Lesson learned. I'm John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me, and have a great day.